Well, I'm not going to be preaching at you. That's for sure. You see here the title, Sow's Ear to Silk Purse. That was me. Sow's Ear. There's a scripture, Proverbs 30, 21 to 23. And it says this: for 3 things the earth is disquieted. In other words, there's so much discontent, there's so much problem in the earth because of these 3 things. And the 4th, the earth cannot bear. 1, a servant when he reigns, that's a big problem. 2, a fool when he's filled with meat, that's another big problem. I'm not going to deal with those. 3, an odious woman when she's married. Do you know what an odious person is? An odious person, in the dictionary, it says someone arousing or meriting strong dislike, or aversion, or intense displeasure. That's an odious person. So the earth's disquieted when an odious woman is married. And the 4th thing is for a handmaid that is heir to her mistress. The earth can't even bear that one. We know the problem with Sarah and Hagar, don't we? You know, once Hagar realised that she was pregnant, then everything changed, and she now felt as though she had the upper hand, and she was despising her mistress because she felt as though she was going to be inheriting, I suppose. She was going to, be the top dog because she was the one who was carrying the child that would carry on to take over the tribe and be the leader. It put her in a very strong position, and she became an odious woman. And that's why Sarah had to get rid of her, because the 2 couldn't live together. There was too much conflict. Well, my story really is about an odious woman when she's married. You see, we've all got DNA in us that comes from our parents. We can't help it. My mum and dad, they really had a bad marriage. It was during the war that my mum and dad got married. My dad had been orphaned when he was younger, so he was passed about from house to house. Whatever house he was in, it was a very poor environment, and he was always a burden. And so he was just passed on somewhere else. He never felt as though he belonged. He never felt wanted. It was a real problem for him. He never felt accepted. But when he joined the army, he found that this was somewhere now that he could... he had respect. He was good at his job. They trained him to be a munitions teacher, and he was a sniper. So he was an A1 marksman. So he used to train soldiers on marksmanship. And he was also very good at PT, so he learned to box. They showed him how to box, and he became a champion boxer while he was in the army. He won lots of trophies, lots of medals and cups, because he did very well. Now, when my mum got married to my dad, the problem was they didn't have anywhere to live. She was still living with her parents. And when he came home on leave, he ended up leaving a pregnant woman. She got pregnant, and she had 2 children while he was still in the army, going through war and everything. No, this was at the end of the war, sorry. But he decided that he wanted to stay in the army because that was where he'd made his career. And so Mum had 2 children while he was still in the army, and she was living with her parents, and she didn't like this at all. It wasn't a nice environment for her. She never felt mistress of her own home. So she would, keep asking my dad to leave the army, and he didn't want to, because this was the place where he'd got respect. He felt acceptance. So she went above his head, and she wrote to superiors and told him of her problem, that she couldn't cope with 2 children on her own, not having a family, a home of her own. So he was discharged from the army. He was sent home. And I don't think my dad ever forgave her because of what she'd done. So it started off really bad. My mum needed him at home. He didn't want to be at home. And that caused a big conflict between them. There was always strife. Now, I only found out when my Mum was in a home when she was in her late 80s. I was just asking them things about the past, and I found out that my mum had actually been a street fighter when she was younger. Her father, I think she was like one of 4 children, 2 brothers, 2 sisters. The father used to put them out on the streets to do fighting bouts, bare fist knuckle fighting in the street. And they used to gamble, as to who was going to win. And this is how she was brought up, and I never knew that at all. I knew that she was feisty. We all knew that in the house. She really knew how to keep us under control. She knew how to uppercut even the older boy who had become 16, 17, and he was doing bodybuilding. If she needed to sort him out, she just knew how to get him where he'd be winded over the sofa. But you see, whenever there was a problem in the house, this was how it was always sorted out. It was fighting. My father and my mother. He wanted to be the man of the house, but she wouldn't let him. She wouldn't let him wear the trousers. She wanted to be the kingpin. She was a lot shorter than he was, but that wasn't going to stop anything. And so all I saw as I was growing up was fighting, and I just grew up with a really big chip on my shoulder. Consequently, that's how I was at school. They used to class me as the school bully. I never ever started fights. Honestly, I never started fights. I knew how to finish them, but I never ever started fights. So I don't know why they called me a bully, because, it wasn't me that was doing the provoking. Well, not that I thought anyway. But it was very, very difficult. When I was 12, I had a sister who was younger than me. I better start from when I was 9, actually. I used to go to church a lot. The Brethren people came round to my school, and they started handing out leaflets for children to go to the meetings, because they were having children's meetings at the church. So my parents wanted to get rid of me, obviously, so I went along there on my own, and I thought it was wonderful hearing these stories about Jesus and about Daniel and David and Goliath, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, all these wonderful stories about these people who've done marvellous exploits for God. And it just used to thrill me. I used to feel so excited inside and hope that, something like that could happen to me one day if I got close to God. Well, a few years later, somebody spoke to my mum and dad. They'd gone out for a day. I think it must have been an anniversary, a wedding anniversary. And my dad had taken my mum out on his motorbike. She was pregnant at the time, and she was sitting on the back of the motorbike, and he ran off to Goresworth with her in Macclesfield, and they went into this old church because I have some ancestors buried there. And for some reason, they sort of remade the marriage vows in this old church with this really old family Bible that stunk because it had been there for centuries. They remade the marriage vows. And when they came out, there was a man standing under a tree, and he talked to them about God. He said, "Do you believe in Jesus?" Well, my mum did. She used to go to church when she was a youngster. Everybody of their generation did, but she got married. She got friends, things happened, and they forgot all about God. So anyway, he's talking to her. Dad wasn't all that interested really, but Mum was. And they ended up, both of them, kneeling down on the gravestones outside this church, committing themselves to God again. And he promised that the next day, which was a Sunday, he would come and he would take them to church. Now, the church was 10 miles away from where we lived. And at that time, Mum had 4 children living at home. So he came round. Nobody was ready because we weren't expecting him to come. But he waited. He wouldn't go away until we'd all got ready. He piled us all into this little car and then drove us to the church. And that was when my mum got healed. She'd had some real complications since the day I was born. I had the cord wrapped around my neck. So they freed me by cutting the cord, but they cut my mum's womb inside, and she ended up with a septic pelvis, fibroids, prolapse, all sorts of complications. They gave her 3 major operations because it was such a dire circumstance, and nothing helped her. So she was just down on the hospital records as being an incurable case. But then 9 years, when I was 9 years old later, they went to this church. They listened to the sermon. At the end, the pastor asked if anybody had physical, mental or spiritual needs. You know, if you want to come to the front, we'll pray for you. She got prayed for, and a miracle happened. She was pregnant. And she said it was like an electric current going through her body, separating around the baby and stopping at her pelvis. Well, she was completely healed. Everybody knew in the avenue, everybody knew. Because one day she was sick, you know, sort of, she'd be grey, she was so ill. And then the next day she was out babbling about Jesus to everybody. And we got so many people from our avenue to come to church with us. It was wonderful. So this changed everything. We started going to church now. We learned hymns. We learned how to find things in the Bible, because sometimes it's very difficult, isn't it, you know. It was great. And every church meeting we were at, and lots of people came to church because my mum had invited them and they'd seen this miracle and they wanted God to do something for them. So things were going great, but, you know, Mum and Dad hadn't really changed. They'd had an experience with God, an encounter, but like the character, Morris's father and mother, they were totally different. Well, I'll say his father because we know his testimony. He was like black one day, white the next. Just a total transformation. But with my parents, it wasn't like that. I mean, maybe they weren't so black, but, you know, they weren't white yet. They was very, very grey. And the fighting carried on. They didn't know how to talk about things. You see, in Morris's family, they used to sit down. If there was a problem, they'd sit down, they'd talk about it and work it out. In my family, if something had gone wrong, things were flying. My dad broke 2 unbreakable cups on my head once, throwing them at me, because it was just an environment that wasn't suitable for anybody. It was horrible. But you see, they were Christians now. And I was very resentful of my parents, you know, because of all this. I remember 3 years after they got saved, so many arguments, so many fights. And then my sister, who was 6 years younger than me, she was arguing with me one day, and she wouldn't stop. And it's horrible, you know, when somebody younger than you won't be quiet, when you've got no control. So I ended up with my hands round her throat, and I only realised what had happened when she went sort of red and slumped to the ground. I'd almost strangled her, and I hadn't realised it. I was trying to be a Christian at 12 years old, you know, because I knew God. I had a relationship with God. I used to talk to him, but this anger, this hatred in me was like a monster that was growing, and I ran upstairs, and I didn't know what to do with myself, because I didn't know how to stop reacting how I was reacting. Then a couple of years later, my brother, he was teasing me, and he wouldn't stop. He was 4 years older than me. He was very cruel, you know, the things that he said. I remember I was sitting at the table at the time when he was going on and on and on, you know, baiting me, and I just picked something up to slash him across the head with it. I picked up the carving knife off the table, and I slashed him. Fortunately, he put up his arm to protect his face, but I'd slashed him. His arm, and he ended up in hospital needing stitches, because I had this monster in me that I didn't know how to control. God's been so merciful. I didn't think there'd be any hope for me, because I kept reading my Bible, kept going to church, kept going to Sunday school, kept hearing about all these wonderful people, you know, who'd made it, who'd done it. And like I still had this hatred in me that wouldn't go away. Well, my brother, he couldn't stand living at home. My sister, she'd got married when she was 17. She was 10 years older than me. No, sorry, 7 years older than me. And she'd got married to the first boy that she met when she was 17, because she just wanted to get out of the house. That was her escape. So that was great. Now somebody could occupy her bed in the room. There was a bit more space. But then my brother, he was now 17, he'd been bodybuilding, weightlifting, doing all sorts of things because he said, one day I'm going to sort my dad out. Well, one day Dad came into the Avenue after a particularly bad time with Mum. He'd thrown her out. There were times when ambulances and police cars had come into the house because my mum had broken ribs, broken jaws. This was as a household of Christians. But then this day, my dad had thrown my mum out because she'd gone a bit mental actually. So anyway, my brother came home and I was ready, I wanted my brother to sort my dad out. I thought my dad was the problem, you see. I thought he was the monster. So I'm telling the tale when my brother comes home. We see my dad come into the Avenue in the car. My dad gets out of the car and he's just about to come to the house and my brother goes rushing out. He's 17 and he punches him in the Avenue. We're there with all the windows, of all the neighbours. Everybody can see this wonderful Christian family. And anyway, my dad didn't retaliate. He got in the car and then the next minute, a few minutes after, we saw the police car coming with him because he'd brought them back so that they would throw my brother out. And once they'd heard the story, they just got their arm around my brother and said, son, you're better off out of here. Come on, let's take you out. They were so gentle, so kind to him. And they turned around to me, Dad, and said, you should be ashamed of yourself. But you see, I think this is why we emphasise so much our ministries to Christians, because I go around the world and I see so many homes, where people come to church, they profess God, they know the scriptures, they know so much, but their home life is abysmal. And the kids grow up seeing all this and it tears people apart. It's with them forever unless God does a miracle and cuts it out. Well, my brother had gone now, so what am I going to do? I've got 2 sisters there at home. I've got my mum, who I feel they need protecting, so it's down to me now. Right, I know what I'm going to do. I'm underage, I'm only 16. I don't know whether I was 15 or 16, something like this anyway, but I was underage, legally. And I thought, I'm going to go in there tonight with a carving knife and I'm going to stick it in my dad while he's asleep in bed. So I remember working myself up to it, I knew I can do this. I had that much hatred in me, I could do this. So I'm standing outside the bedroom door and I'm waiting to hear them snore and, for everything to go really still. And I knew that this was my time now, I could go in. And my heart started pounding. I don't know whether you've ever felt this when you know you're going to do something really evil, really wicked, and your heart starts pounding. And it was so loud in my ears, it was deafening me. And my dad's got very, very good hearing. And I thought, if I go in there and he hears my heart pounding like I can hear, he's going to wake up. He's not going to ask any questions. He's going to get the knife from me and stick it in me instead of it being the other way around. And I thought, I'm not going to put myself in that predicament. So I backed away. And to me, I felt as though I was being a coward. I was drawing away. My mum had always said that she would get a divorce. But I thought she was a coward because she never went through with it, because she couldn't support the family on her own. She needed Dad there because of the kids. And I just thought, I'm just like my mum, I'm a coward. And I hated myself even more. Well, I'm so grateful that I went to this particular church and had this particular pastor. He was a godsend. Because often, even though it was 10 miles away and I needed to get 2 buses and I didn't have any money, I'd find all-day tickets on the floor. In those days, people would throw them on the floor and I'd pick it up and I'd get on the bus, cover the date up, just show it. And I'd get to the pastor's house, banging on his door. I remember one particular day, and he opened the door to me and he said, "Hello, Joanna, nice to see you." I said, I was telling him all the problems that had gone on at home. why has God allowed all this to happen? Why doesn't God do something about it? Oh, he said, I was just praying this morning. He said, Mrs. Barratt's not feeling so well today. And I asked God if he'd send somebody round to help her. And he sent you. And I thought, why does God have to cause all this war at home, Why can't he just talk to me instead of being like this? And he brought me in and he just made me so welcome, made me part of the family, he'd give me lunch and he'd talk to me, and I befriended his 2 daughters who were similar ages to me. It was my refuge going round to his house, and he made a promise to me and he said that if I learned how to type, he'd make me the church secretary. So, being a nice Christian that I was, I lied my way into night school, told them I was older than I was, and I learned to type, and the next year I became the church secretary. At 16, I had my name on the letterheading. But that was my salvation. If I hadn't had that, I don't know where I'd be now. I'm sure I'd have been in prison. Because when we go to prisons and I tell my story, people come up to me afterwards and say, that's the sort of environment I was brought up in. People are products of their environment. This is why we've got problems. This is why we've got a problem society, because the home life, it's such a mess. Well, I became the church secretary, I became the organist, I became a singer in the music group, because Maurice was running a group then and he was looking for a singer. He helped me to play the keyboard. Everybody in the church who knew music had left and I could play with 2 fingers, so they thought that I was the candidate, So I used to play the hymns with 2 fingers until Maurice taught me a few chords. So it was just wonderful. And the fact that I was pastor's secretary meant that every Saturday I used to go to his house, because he had his offices downstairs in the cellar. So I'd come for lunch, I'd have lunch with the family, then I'd go down in the cellar, and I'd do his work, his office work, then I'd come up for tea, and he had his daughters there, so it was great, absolutely great. But you see, he used this time, Pastor Barratt used this time, because my mind, it was so twisted and gnarled, it needed renewing. So after lunch I'd go down and he'd show me the work to do, and I'd say something, maybe I'd make a comment about something, and he used every opportunity to get his Bible out and sit down with me, and he'd go through the Bible and he'd talk and he'd talk and he'd talk, and I used to get washed and washed and washed and cleaned, and it was so wonderful. I don't know where I'd have been without him. He was the first man I ever fell in love with. So I was 17, and because I was in this music group, Pastor Barratt was going on tour. He was going to Holland, and he said that we could go for 2 weeks with him, you see, for all these conferences. He had all these meetings set up, and this was wonderful. I'd never been out of England before. In fact, I don't think I'd been anywhere. Maybe I'd been to Blackpool once with my mum and dad, but I was actually going abroad, to Europe. So I got a passport and I went. It was just wonderful. I had my introduction to really doing something for God and being in the environment of Christians, and it was another world, and I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It spoiled me for anything. I didn't want a career, didn't want marriage, I didn't want anything. This is what I wanted to do. I just wanted to serve God. Yeah, so I had a purpose now. I didn't need marriage. This was my life. Now, when I knew Maurice, he was very different, because I've told you a little bit about where he came from. It was a lovely environment. His father was so godly. I witnessed that. Whatever he preached on a Sunday, that was what he was like in his home. He was no different. In fact, I remember being there one day and I thought, one of these days he's going to forget that I'm here. I was really, really quiet, One of these days he's going to forget that I'm here and I'm going to see the real him, because that's how my dad was. He'd be really nice and charming if people were in the house. But when he'd gone, it was a different story. But that was him. And I was so surprised, because Liz, who's my age, Maurice's sister, she'd gone to university. And instead of getting a flat when she'd been to university, for 3 years, having your own flat and living your own life, doing your own thing, having nobody telling you what to do, she'd come back home. I couldn't work this out. This was so foreign to me, because as soon as I could, I was only 16 and I got a flat. I got a job and a flat straight away. Nobody was going to tell me what to do anymore. And I said to her one day, I was, just talking to her, and I intimated that she was probably a bit too weak, to be on her own, that she couldn't cope. And she said, "Is that what you think?" I said, "Well, why else would you go and live with your mum and dad, after all your freedom?" She said, "Oh no," she says, "I love living with my mum and dad. I love being there." That shocked me more than my mum getting healed. Because we're talking about life now, not an encounter with God, but life, normal everyday life. She loved being with her parents. So this was so miraculous. So Maurice and I were very, very different, and we got a relationship going, because he used to help me with the piano, showing me music, and he was always doing work in the church. He believed that there were two types of Christians, right? One is the spiritual Christian, the one that's always at the prayer meetings, the one that's always at every meeting in the church. They're always praying, they're always fasting, they're always seeking God, like his dad. And the other one is the practical Christian, right? The one that does the building and all the maintenance in the church. And Maurice had already decided what he wanted to be. He was the practical Christian. He was not the spiritual Christian. He was the practical one. Now, I loved everything that Pastor Barratt did. I used to watch him with such intent when he was on the platform. I'd follow his every movement. I was almost breathing with him. We were that much in sync. It was wonderful. And because he could prophesy, he could see visions. This was what I wanted. I wanted the relationship that he had with God was what I was after. It really, really provoked me to godliness. So I'd go off on fasting holidays, and like sometimes I'd drag Maurice's two sisters with me, because I'd sort of enthuse them, saying we needed to do this and do that, and they'd come, and we had some great times together. And that's where God helped me really to grab hold of this gift of visions and prophecy, because I've been saved when I was very young, 9, but I'd been baptised in water when I was 12. I'd been filled in the Holy Ghost when I was 12. So what else is there now? There's nothing else to it, is there? You've done it all when you're 12. And I realised with watching Pastor Barratt that there was more to it. And so I decided that I was going to seek these things. So I came back with Liz and Chris, and Maurice saw that we'd changed so much, that now I was in this spiritual realm. Every time I prayed, I was getting something from God because it was so new. You'd been looking. And so he used to call me his Urim and Thummim. In the Old Testament, the priests, they used to wear these stones, and that's how they used to communicate with God, the people, by going to the Urim and Thummim. Because you see, he was the practical Christian. He wasn't the spiritual. He was very happy for me to be the spiritual Christian. He was the practical, and he'd jump on my bandwagon. Well, then Maurice started working with gangsters. Well, he'd been working with gangsters for a while, actually, while I was knowing him. But I think because of what he'd seen, with all these people and the way it was pulling him, I think I was provoking him to godliness, because he was seeing me change. And I was changing. I was changing out of all recognition. And then one day, Pastor and Mrs. Barratt, they'd gone off on holiday. I think Pastor Barratt had gone on a crusade. Mrs. Barratt had gone to Southport because she has a sister there. So the house was empty. And I said that I'd house sit for them, you see, for the 2 weeks while this was going on. And I asked if it would be okay, because I wanted to fast and pray, you see, I wanted to seek God. So Maurice got wind of what I was going to do, and he said that he would come as well, you see, during the lunchtime from working with these gangsters. And he would pray with me. So I thought this was great, I was always one for sort of encouraging Maurice, because he was Pastor Barratt's son, he should be stronger than this by now, So anyway, I remember sitting and praying with him one day. I was on this side of the room, he was on that side of the room. And my hair started to grow in this vision. And it went right down my knee onto the floor. It went across the room. It started going up Maurice's legs and creeping up his body. It came up onto his head, and it had that bald patch on his head for a long, long time. And this hair went inside the bald patch, actually inside his head, and it attached itself to some nerves in the back of his neck here. And you know, like you've got a chicken leg. You know, when you cut a chicken leg off and you've got these sinews coming out, and if you pull the sinews, give that to your kids if you can get them. They'll have great fun with them, scaring everybody. Well, if you pull them like that, this is what happens, you see, reflexes. Well, this is what was happening with Maurice. I could get hold of his hair, at the top, my hair that had gone in him, and I could pull it like this, and Maurice would be going, you know, sort of dancing to my tune. But then I saw a pair of scissors coming down from heaven, cutting the hair, tying a knot in it, and then God got hold of it, and he started doing that. And I thought, this is wonderful. I've started the process, and this is what God wants to do. He wants to get hold of Maurice and start pulling his thing. So I thought this was marvellous. It didn't happen then. Years later, Maurice and we get married. I didn't want to get married. That was not on my agenda, because whenever I looked in the mirror, whenever I combed my hair, whenever I looked there, I could see my mum looking back at me. And it was only after I left home that I realised what had gone on. See, I used to think that my dad was the monster, but it was my mum. She was the one that was goading and provoking all the time. She'd say things. She just didn't know how to close her mouth, how to control her tongue at all. And he would have been a different man with a different woman. But you see, I was like her. I just didn't know how to say the right thing. The Bible says a soft answer turns away wrath. I didn't know any soft answers. If we said sorry, you know, when I was living with my parents, if we said sorry, that meant you were wrong. It was an admission of guilt. But I wasn't wrong, so why say sorry? Do you know what I mean? So why say something soft when all you're feeling inside is hard? And I was taught that you had to be honest, you see. So why pretend that you're okay with something when you're not? All these confusions. It was so hard to get over. So I was afraid of getting married, because I thought I'd just end up like her. Sign my name, you know, I'll marry this man. And I'm just giving him legal right to do whatever he wants. Whenever he's angry, you know, whenever he's come home upset. And I didn't want that. So Maurice and I were great, because we'd come from the same stock. You see, Pastor Barratt was Maurice's proper father. What do you call it when you... biological father. He was Maurice's biological father, but he was my spiritual father, and he fed so much into me of God. We both knew where we wanted to go. We both had the same vision, with both direction. We wanted to work with him. He taught us both. Everything that we knew about God, the Sermon on the Mount, everything, it came from him. So we had the same education, and that was our starting point. You know, we couldn't have had a better start. Well, 2.5 years after we'd got married, I had Nathan. And now I knew what God meant by cutting the hair. We'd had a great relationship. We could talk about God. Wonderful, you know. We'd get revelation together. We'd read the Bible together. But now I had a little child who was demanding my attention. And it was so different. Instead of it being so intense, you know, between Maurice and I was easily distracted, because I was the mum. And like the baby needed me to feed him. I was breastfeeding for a year. I needed him to look after it, or change his nappy, or mop up some sick. And Maurice couldn't have that direct, you know, intimate relationship that he had before, and he resented it. Now, fortunately, we had somebody working and living with us at the time. Or should I say living and working for us at the time, whichever way around anyway. And so he used to go to this guy and talk to him. It was great, because, you know, he knew where he was coming from. They had some great relationships, great fellowship. But it meant that it was broken off, my relationship with him. I know now that God was cutting that hair. But at the time, it was so painful. It was so hard to cope with, and I resented it. I really did, because I felt as though I'd lost my best friend. I felt as though I'd lost my partner. I'm so glad that it was a man in the house and not a woman, because I'd have felt so jealous. I mean, I was jealous as it was, because he was going to the sky, but it was a horrible position to be in. And then, to make the situation worse, I had another child 3 years later, and this was even worse, because now I had 2 kids to cope with. With the first one, Maurice and I had been able to go travelling together, because you only need, to look after one baby. But now 2, that's different. It's very hard. So I had to stay at home, and that made it so much harder. Because now, at that particular time, God had told Maurice to stop travelling abroad, and we were supposed to stay in the UK and do house groups, and that's when the house group started, when Isaac was born. And Maurice used to go to all these house groups every night while I stayed at home looking after the children. Oh, and I'd get so jealous, and he'd come back so excited because he'd had fellowship. Because, the house groups, they're so good, aren't they? They're not like church, it's so good. And I used to feel as though I was like this pot, that had been made, just put on the shelf there. No use for it anymore. I'd served my purpose. It was a horrible place to be, because I'd been in the limelight for such a long time, In fact, people had always asked us to go and minister because they'd been wanting concerts. And I was the singer, and it was me that they wanted. And now it was Maurice that they wanted. So it was so hard. So I didn't only get the haircut, it was like the pride and the place where I'd been, the status, everything had been cut from underneath me. God was getting away from all the props and everything that I'd been relying on. It was good. It was good. On hindsight, it was good. I look back, but at the time it was very painful. Well, I remember having these children, and I didn't even know how to talk to people anymore about God. The communication had stopped, because I was singing nursery rhymes with kids all day, Baa Baa Black Sheep and Grand Old Duke York, and so I'd be singing that going to bed instead of the choruses that I used to be singing. So Maurice and I decided that we'd work it out, that we'd take it in turns for our quiet times. Well, it was great, Maurice did this. He was okay having his quiet time. He wasn't distracted at all by the children downstairs. But I found that when he gave me the opportunity to go and have some quiet time, all I was doing was, I couldn't hear God. I was just had my ear up now. I was listening to the kids. Every little squeak, every movement, it was awful. I couldn't concentrate. So I remembered reading a verse of scripture that says, if you're married to somebody that isn't saved, you're the Christian, that you actually sanctify them. Because you're the Christian, otherwise the children wouldn't be holy. So the whole family's sanctified because you are. And vice versa, if the man's married to a woman that isn't saved, he sanctifies her. So I thought, well, if that's the case, then surely the two of us, because we are Christians, surely he can sanctify me. So I said to him, all right, Maurice, I'm going to give you freedom. You go and have your quiet time and sanctify a lot of us, because I need help here. So that was great. Once I'd settled that, I was okay, because I felt such a fraud, you feel condemned, don't you? And God was showing me all the time that you're saved by grace, not by works. You're saved by grace. And surely God can keep you if you're saved by grace. But the grumbling continued with me, because I really was lacking with fellowship, and then I'd had Tamar, and things just seemed to get worse and worse and worse. And I said to God, how many kids do I need, before I sort of get this sorted out? So anyway, I remember Maurice going to a house group once, and it was with this old couple who were having a house group in their home. And the lady had written to me, and I got this letter through the door, and she was saying Joanna, I'm so grateful that you've allowed Morris to come to my house. You know, me and my husband, we've not had a good marriage. Been married for 50 years now. We've not had a good marriage because he felt as though he had to marry me. You know, I was pregnant. He married me just for the sake of keeping face. But it's been a really hard marriage because somebody told him that you have to treat her how you mean to go on. So, you know, if you're going to be too good to her, she'll be expecting it, so don't treat her too well. So he didn't, consequently, he didn't treat her very well at all. And like the whole marriage had been going on like this, you see, for 50 years. Well, they'd started coming to Morris's teaching, even though they'd been Christians, hearing the Sermon on the Mount, and that's all to do with attitude. And they changed. And it was wonderful. In fact, she said that she'd never been out for a meal in all this time that she'd been married, 50 years. She said, but I just want to say how grateful I am that you've been so unselfish sending Morris to our house. She says, because it's changed things. She says, in fact, I'm going out today to buy a dress because my husband's taking me out for a meal for the first time in our 50 years of marriage. Well, I bawled my eyes out when I got that. I cried and I cried because, you see, I looked at that letter and I wanted to be that woman that she thought I was. That's what I wanted, to be that unselfish person, because Morris's father had put so much time into me. I knew it was my turn now. The Bible says, freely have received, freely give. And I know that many people did not like the way Pastor Barratt had been so kind to me, you know, giving me preferential treatment, taking me into his home. And I know that even his own daughters didn't like the fact that he'd spent hours and hours and hours and hours talking to me personally, my mind being renewed and me coming up like, you know, from being in the cellar and my eyes had been on fire. Like it'd be so wonderful. It was just transforming. So I knew that it was my turn now to give. And to be honest with you, that changed a lot in me. That took all that bitterness and that hurt away, because now I realised as though I was part of a ministry, even though I wasn't there. I was sending Morris out. And if I sent him out with my blessing, then it was going to make all the difference. So I said to Morris, it's all right, Morris, you can go every night of the week. It doesn't matter to me now. He was trying to say, you know, we need a night. I thought, no. If you need to go out every night of the week, because we had so many house groups there, it was wonderful. So I think it's all to do with your attitude. It's got to be your attitude, hasn't it? Once you submit to the fact that you're married now, you've not got your own life, you're not living your own life. And you see, I'm in a nice position now because I'm an older woman, and it says that the older women are supposed to teach the younger women that they may be in behaviour as becometh holiness. Not false accusers, not given to much wine, so keep off the drink, teachers of good things, and that you may teach the younger women to be sober. That's like serious, that's not frivolous. You know, not silly and stupid. People who are drunk, they're not in control of themselves, are they? You've got to be in control of yourself. This is how we're supposed to live. And to love their husbands. I'm supposed to be telling people that you're supposed to really love your husband. You know, you might have it might not be what you want, okay? You might have got married to somebody and they've not turned out to be what you particularly want. But, you know, you can change that environment. If my mum had kept her mouth shut, if my mum had tried to be a godly woman and love God, and the proof that you love God is if you can love other people, you know, that's how you prove. If you can love somebody that you can't see, if you can love somebody that you can see, then you can say that you love somebody that you can't see. But if you say that you love God and you can't love your brother, you're a liar. Because the proof of the pudding is you can't do it to those that are actually there physically. We're supposed to love our husbands. We're supposed to look at the things that we were attracted to at the beginning. You know, try and conjure it up again. Where did it go? Why did it go wrong? Let's trace it back. Let's see if we can sort this out. Let's see if we can put it back on the right footing. Did I do something to cause a problem there? Did I make him feel insecure? Did I say something? Did I do something? Let's trace it back and let's work it through. And to love their children. It's so easy to get angry and frustrated at your children. But they're products of you. You can make your children what you want them to be. You can show them a good example. I remember when I had my children, I thought, oh Lord, I'm in big trouble now. I said, Lord, this is what I wanted. I wanted the kids to look like me and to have the character of Morris. But this is what I wanted. Because I thought if it's the other way around, it's gonna be traumatic in the home. God didn't answer that prayer. But He did change me. And I remember saying, one day I prayed to God and I said, Lord, the book stops here. Whatever I experienced when I was living at home with my parents, the book stops here. I never ever want my children to see that. I never ever want to duplicate their attitude, their behaviour in front of my children. Whatever it was when I lived at home, Lord, all that's got to change. I can't bring that into another home. I can't start the process over and over again. You can't do that. It's not allowed. It's not fair to the kids. So I had a great chance, because when Maurice and I first got married, the house was filled with people. We had other people living with us, and we sectioned it off so that Maurice and I could be on our own, and the other people could live in the house, but would be separate. So we used to have another kitchen up there. But you see, whenever I had a problem, like we were at home, we didn't just talk about things. We'd be shouting and bawling and throwing things and whatever. Well, I didn't actually throw things, but I'd be shouting and bawling and, going high-do all the time. But I realised the other people were listening to me. And I was so embarrassed at how I felt I would feel if I was listening on the other side of the door. I knew what it would sound like, and I'm telling you, if you've got problems, you can't control your temper, get somebody living with you, because that sorts you out quickly. Because you're ashamed. You don't want other people to hear you. I thought if they'd take that and I listened back, I knew I'd have been in the wrong. I knew it, because I just couldn't hold my tongue. I couldn't, it had to come out. So I decided that I was going to keep quiet. And God's been good. God's been good. If we put the effort in, if we know that there's areas that we need to change, God will do the rest. All we need to do is start. We just need to try. We just need to see our problems, and God can sort it all out. Well, I hope it's been helpful, what I've shared with you. You see, God gave Maurice and I another vision before we got married. Because we had this conflict where the ministry was concerned, I was always in demand, and now Maurice was starting to get in demand, and we wouldn't take the responsibility, either of us. And I had this vision where God put a candlestick, one of those wee Willy Winky candlesticks with a little handle on. And He put the candlestick on the table in the middle of us, and He pushed it to one of us. I can't remember which one He pushed it to first, but either of us, whoever it was, we pushed it to the other side, to the other person. Like Maurice and I were sitting across the table. We pushed it to the other side, and then it would come back, and we kept pushing it. And God got so frustrated that neither of us singly would pick up this candlestick. He got so frustrated, He picked it up. And instead of walking off with it, what He did, He put another holder at the other side, and He put it down so we could both get hold of it together. And we both lifted it up, and the oil that was in this candle, whatever it was, because you normally have wax from a candle, but it was like oil, and it was coming down and it was spreading over the two of us, and because we're side by side holding this candle together, it was now big rather than just this little candle, and it burst into flames. And He said the fire coming from the two of us jointly would be greater than it ever would have been if either of us had picked this candle up. If you can work with your husband, if you can really get that unity in your marriage. If you can be one, you know, it's such a witness to the world, because the world doesn't see that anymore. So confused, isn't it? All split up. You know, you don't even have a mum and dad now. It's family life has all gone haywire. But you know, people are really looking for that unity. If they see it, they will admire it. They will want it. It will be a great testimony to God. So, thank you very much for listening.